This video tutorial will demonstrate how you use Zoom's interpreter feature. The tutorial will be broken into 3 parts. The first part will show you how to manage the settings in your Zoom account to enable interpreter services. The next part will show you how to schedule the meeting and assign an interpreter to the meeting. The final part of the tutorial will demonstrate how to use the interpreter features inside the meeting. Before we go any further, it is important to note that the host of the meeting must have a certain level Zoom account to enable Zoom's interpreter feature. If you go to Zoom's support page and do a search for interpreters, you will come to this resource page. According to the resource page, the host must have the business, education, or enterprise plan, or one of the other plans with a webinar add-on. Once again, only the host must have one of the prerequisite plans. All participants in the meeting, regardless of whether they have one of their prerequisite accounts or whether they have any Zoom account at all, will be able to utilize the interpreter feature inside the meeting. With that in mind, the first step is to enable interpretation in your settings. Log on to your account and click on Settings. Next, click on In Meetings Advanced. Locate Language Interpretation and toggle on Language Interpretation. The toggle will turn blue when it is active. Once you have enabled language interpretation in your settings, you can skip this step in the future when you schedule meetings with interpreters. The next step is to schedule the meeting and identify the interpreter. Click on Schedule a Meeting, and you will identify the topic of the meeting. You could put in a description, which is optional. I'll leave that blank. You'll put in the date, time, and duration. We're going to scroll down to Interpretation, and you're going to click on Enable Interpretation. This will give you a place for you to put in the email address of the interpreter. And then you'll come over to Language, click on the drop-down arrow, and that will give you the different languages. In this case, we'll put Spanish. If you had additional interpreters, you can click on Add Interpreter, and you'll do the same thing once again, putting in their email address and the language to which they're going to be interpreting to. Click on Save, and that is going to schedule our meeting for us. At this point, we can copy the invitation and send it to our participants. The interpreter will get an email which identifies them as the interpreter for the meeting. However, the hyperlink to the meeting is the same link that the other participants will receive. This is important to note because accessing the meeting using that link does not automatically make that person the interpreter. The interpreter must log in with the email address that was used in the scheduling of the meeting. If the interpreter were to log in with a different email address than the one that was used to schedule the meeting, they would be viewed as a participant and not as an interpreter. That will make a significant difference once inside the meeting. The interpreter should create a Zoom account if they don't already have one before the meeting. It does not matter what the level account is, it can be a basic account. The final part of the tutorial will show you how to use the interpreter function inside the meeting, both from the host view as well as the interpreter's view. First, you need to start the meeting. Along the bottom of your screen, you'll see a toolbar, and at the far right, you'll see a small globe under which you'll see the word Interpretation. Click on this box. This will open up a dialog box. Inside the box, you will see the list of interpreters that you have previously assigned. There is also a box to click to add an interpreter. However, this function has never worked for me. I've tried it several times, and the intended interpreter has never received the email to serve as an interpreter. And if they should log on under the assigned email address, they are not recognized as an interpreter, just as a participant. I think this is a bug that Zoom will need to fix. In order to start interpretation services, you must click Start. Once you have started interpretation services, you'll need to click on the globe again to pick the audio channel you wish to hear. The participants will do the same. In this case, I will click on English. You'll notice that the globe has turned into an American flag. The interpreter will hear the original meeting audio, which they can translate. Participants in the English audio channel will hear the other English speakers as well as the individuals in the other language channel, but at a lower volume. If you do not wish to hear the non-English channels, you can click on the American flag again, and this time click on Mute Original Audio. When you click on Mute, you will only hear the other participants in the English channel, as well as the interpreter when they are translating into English. I will now show you what it looks like from the interpreter's perspective. Once the host has started interpretation services, the interpreter will receive a welcome notification indicating that they have been assigned as an interpreter. You will also see a small window at the bottom of the screen that allows the interpreter to toggle between both languages, in this case between English and Spanish. When the interpreter is translating from English to Spanish, they will click on Spanish. When the interpreter is translating from Spanish to English, they will click on English. There are a couple things you need to keep in mind when using interpreter services. First, the interpreter cannot call in to provide interpretation. They must log in with their email address that was used in the scheduling of the meeting. Second, you cannot do an instant meeting and add an interpreter to the meeting. You must schedule a meeting first and identify the interpreter. To recap, enable interpretation services in your settings. Second, schedule a meeting and identify the interpreters. Finally, start interpretation services inside the meeting.